Well, good evening. It's Friday night. Welcome to PJ Net Live right here. And we always enjoy Friday nights. We kind of party and let our hair down and go loose, kind of do something a little different. But starting tonight and every Friday night, we're going to have a special diversion from that party. And a dear friend of PJ Net, a dear friend of mine, and a very interesting person, one of the most analytical minds I have ever encountered, we have with us here in the studio. And I want to introduce you to our friend Roger, who comes to us from the great state of Louisiana. And Roger and I have been kind of doing the technical thing for the past, I don't know. So, Roger, you are the only visual on the screen right now. We're struggling with technical difficulties. That is essentially correct. But Roger, I'm really looking forward to this in 2019, and we're trying to find a way to capture and title this thing, and the only thing we've come up with is cultural commentary, because since we first met I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, it's been a while. We have had many.
We met Mark actually very shortly after Obama was reelected. It's been 6 years. Yeah.
That's been a while. And we've had some very interesting, very deep conversations. So there's a lot of topics, but we wanted to start tonight out because we're going to be doing a lot of topics throughout the year. But right now, you're on a journey. Right now, you've been very active in the past on Twitter and politically, but your life has taken kind of a new turn. So bring us up to speed and tell us what are you pontificating
I'm
tonight?
Pontificating on many things in the culture tonight, and some of them do coincide with my own spiritual journey. By the way, I'm at American Refugee on Twitter. At American Refugee on Twitter. I used to dress up in the superhero costume and hand out constitutions as the American Refugee. And that's still my most popular Twitter account. So that's where you can find me on Twitter. But, Mark, you're a married man. Yes. I am a single man. We're both Christians. You're a Catholic. I'm a Baptist. But we both have a strong
I think you got that backwards. You're Catholic.
Yeah, you're a Baptist. I'm a Catholic. But we both have a strong relationship with Christ. And one of the things that I was finding it increasingly difficult to do was to live a chaste lifestyle in my spirituality. Now, when I use the word chaste, to some people, they go to the third or fourth definition of chaste, which is basically celibacy. But if you look up chaste in the dictionary, the first or the second definitions will always have to do with abstaining from unlawful sex, or abstaining from premarital sex, abstaining from sex outside of marriage if one is not married. And of course, even if one is married, one can have non-chaste sex within marriage if the sex becomes about nothing but selfishness, and so on and so forth. And
well, let me before we go a little bit further down that road, to kind of frame it up. First of all, it's a doubles world, and living single in a doubles world, apart from any other issue, is difficult because the everything is designed around the notion that you're married or whatever,
right,
that you're involved in a relationship. So before we get into that, or your topic, how uncomfortable is it to live single in a couple's world, and try to think of some examples?
Well, it becomes less and less difficult the stronger your relationship with Christ is. I can tell you, when I was struggling with my relationship with Christ, it becomes really difficult. Now, for one thing, there's some things that even carry over. Many functions are set up, even at churches. Many functions are set up either as couples events or singles events. Okay.
Right.
Well, what if you're not specifically looking for a wife right now? Okay, so you don't want to go to
That's
the
what I'm saying.
singles event.
It's a couple's
Yeah,
world. There's an
it's a couple's world.
assumption. There's a baseline of you're a couple. Everybody's a
There's a
half of a couple.
there's a baseline that everybody is a couple, and not everybody is. So it is a little bit difficult, but I can tell you this: the closer your relationship with Christ is, and the more Christian friends that you have, the less problematic it becomes. And the more you're able to move throughout life. Now, I am not someone who has made the decision that I will always be single. I was married once. I'm divorced, and I don't believe in divorce, for one thing. But it was probably a mistake for me to get married when I did get married. I hadn't been clean and sober long enough yet. I've been clean and sober, by the way, Mark, now for 17 years. And it'll be exactly 17 years coming up this week. And when I first got clean and sober, I kind of stayed out of relationships for a little while because I wanted to focus on that. And then once I started to look for a relationship, quite frankly, Mark, I married the first girl I kissed in sobriety. I
Hmm.
really did, because you know why I married her? Okay, I could say it's because I loved her, but you know why I married her so fast? Like before we were really sure, I married her because I wanted to have sex. Okay, that's really
Oh,
what it comes
yeah.
down to. I wanted to have Christian lawful sex, and it was because you see, Mark, when the whole time I was drinking and drugging. I didn't have this problem. Although I considered myself to be a Christian, there's no such thing as an active drug addict and alcoholic that is living a moral lifestyle, okay, and that's doing real well on their walk with Jesus, or is a responsible person and ready to be a husband for that matter. So the fact of the matter is, I was irresponsible. I wasn't ready to be a husband for years, and I was living in a moral lifestyle where I usually did have some sort of a girlfriend. I would go from one to the next over and over again, in fact, and lived a very, very unchaste lifestyle. Um,
Well,
gets
Roger, we every Saturday morning I get together with a group of men,
Mhm.
and we each, we have our struggles, but we talk very openly
Mhm.
about them. It's only us men. There's no women involved. But one of the men uh, is well, he has a drinking problem.
Mhm.
He has many other problems, but this is a great guy, by the way,
Mhm.
a very successful businessman. But in the cadence, according to the book, you're supposed to challenge each other and hold each other accountable. And there's one guy there that takes that a little bit more rigorously than the rest of us, and he's so by the book. And
Mhm.
one morning he looked at this guy and said, "Well, Brian, you still struggling with drinking?" And I interrupted and said, "No, he just gives in." So, but the same thing could apply to sexuality or any other vice. Is sometimes people ask me, I don't sleep that much. I do this and then I work all day, and basically I sleep about 3 or 4 hours a night. But anyway, they say, well, why don't you need to get more sleep? I say, well, I have a guilty conscience. How can I sleep? And they look at me funny, like I'm,
Mhm.
and I say, but you don't understand. Before I was living for Christ, I didn't have a guilty conscience. I just did what I wanted
You
to.
do what you want to do. And
At least I feel bad
you
about it
turn
now.
off your conscience. Alcohol is a good thing to do, even if you're a believer. Alcohol, cocaine, these are good ways to turn off the conscience. Okay, and when you start trying to live right, and you start trying to grow in sanctity, and you start trying to grow in your walk with Christ, it changes. You start hearing that inner voice of God speaking to you, and your conscience starts to become informed. Informing one's conscience is an extremely important concept. There are some people that misunderstand certain things in theology when one talks about how they should follow their conscience. Yes, if your conscience is properly informed by God. Okay, for many, many, many Protestants, that's going to mean looking to the Bible only. For some, it's going to mean for Catholics, it's going to mean looking to the Bible and looking at the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Okay. But I can't tell you how many cafeteria Catholics I'll meet, and they'll say, well, I disagree with church teaching on birth control. And I'll say, really? Have you ever read the encyclical that says why the church is against birth control? And they say, no. Okay. And I say, okay, well, you don't have an informed conscience. And now, for somebody who's not Catholic, they don't have to read it, okay? For somebody who is Catholic, they should be reading it and informing their conscience. And all Christians should be looking to the Bible and informing their conscience.
Yeah, it was kind of a rough day at work today, and at one point, now I quit drinking. I don't have the day. I wasn't an alcoholic. I just loved beer
Right.
all the time. But as having the kind of day that I said to somebody, I said, I hadn't had a drink in 15 years, but I'm really thinking about taking up the habit.
I loved beer, cocaine, and women. Okay. And I love beer, cocaine, and sex, or actually any alcoholic beverage. Cocaine and sex were the things that I very much loved, and that had to get left behind. But moving beyond that, one of the things I'll tell you, when I got sober and I started to get right with God, let me tell you one of the problems I had. First year sober, they advised me stay out of a relationship. You're crazy. Then when I got to a year sober, they said, we lied to you. You really need to stay out of a relationship for about 2 years. We just knew you wouldn't do that if we told you that when you first got sober. So I avoided it for another year. And at about 2 years sober, Mark, I was lonely. And I began looking to date in a Christian way and looking to eventually find a wife. And I found out something amazing, Mark, and I don't know how many Christians have had this problem when they start to walk with Christ. But, Mark, when I was a liar, when I was a con man, when I was a manipulator, I was very successful with the ladies. At 2 years sober, as an honest, spiritual, decent man, I could not get a date. I'm not blaming the women for that necessarily. I had failed in my years of alcoholism and drug addiction to develop normal social skills. I had developed the social skills of a lying con man, okay? And when I was developing the social skills of a lying con man, I wasn't developing the social skills of a normal person. And I think I probably lacked the social skills to properly attract a mate. So I decided to start dating at 2 years sober. Well, 2 years later at 4 years sober, Mark, I had never had more than one first date with any woman, and I had not kissed a woman now in 4 years. Okay? And so I was getting pretty desperate. So when I met a young lady in AA that wanted to go out with me and that kissed me, we were married inside of 30 days. That was I rushed it. Okay, I rushed it very, very, very much, and that marriage did not work out. And had we done it properly, and had we gone to premarital counseling and through the church, and had we attempted to have like a 1-year engagement, something like that, we would have found out that we weren't right for each other. But we didn't.
Well, one of the things that struck me as you said that, Sunbelt Girl one time made a very, very profound observation on another topic, but I think it's equally as applicable here. Now, I was going to ask you, let me guess, you didn't go to any counseling, and you've already answered that in your...
Oh, it's a little bit worse than didn't go. I went once. And the priest basically... I went one time. The priest talked to us together, and he talked to us separately, and then he talked to us together again, and then he talked to me separately again. And he said, Roger, number one, I don't think you're mature enough to get married yet, and there's some things I think you need to work on. Number two, that young lady is deeply mentally ill and has no idea what marriage is about. And he could not have been more right. And he wasn't putting her down. She was mentally ill. He was not putting the woman down. And I was unwilling to hear it, and the counseling ended there.
Exactly. And there. That was my point, is sometimes we fail to reach out to the church or whatever support group we may have But the church is there to minister to that need, but we don't reach out to them. And here's the catch. Here's the punchline that Sunbelt Girl so profoundly said. Because you already know what they're going to say, and you don't want to hear it.
No.
Now,
no, I didn't want to hear it.
place the church is culpable here.
Mm-hmm.
In the and not in the situation you're describing. Okay, he did
right.
The priest sounds like he did the right thing, but so often when someone is going through alcoholism or going through a divorce or going through financial problems, we're very warm and open and welcome to lost people. But once you're saved, we're not as understanding as we are to the unbeliever. You're a believer now. You shouldn't do that. Well, I think we all are aware we shouldn't do that. I need help in not doing that. So I was kind of using that to tee it up to bring back to where you started. Your journey now, single in a doubles world.
Single in a doubles world. And now I want to make it clear that I have not necessarily made the decision to remain single forever. The church, in my case, doesn't even recognize my marriage because as a Catholic, I was required to get married in the Catholic Church, and I went and got married by a justice of the peace. Okay, so the church doesn't even recognize my marriage, so I could get married in the Catholic Church.
Right, you sort of spiritually eloped.
Yes, but I still, divorce is nothing that I ever wanted in life, and the experience kind of shook me badly. And where I am now is, Lord, if you want me to get married, put the woman in my life that you want me to marry when you want to, but I'm not going out and looking for it. And Mark, I'm not strong enough to go to a whole lot of singles meetings and this and that and the other, and then not get ahead of myself and not jump ahead. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually just I don't hide in a hole. But I don't look for a wife. I don't ask women out on dates. And I just trust that if and when the Lord wants me to get married, he's going to put the right woman in my life.
I see. And I think that's a fair approach. I mean, my daughter is approaching 22. And the game's very different today. I would say pursue your goals, your ambitions, and develop yourself as a person. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, you will attract a more compatible mate. But if you go out looking for a mate, I mean, today they have dating sites where I presume, I've never been on a dating site, but I've seen the commercials. Mm-hmm. I presume that you can just put your resume out there and you can look at other people's resume. And that seems kind of shallow to me, although I do know some people who met that way who have wholesome, healthy marriages. So I don't have a lot of experience with that, but it seems to me it's like we've talked about in business. You pursue excellence in what you do, and the income and the money is a parenthetical side effect of doing something well.
Exactly.
Well, I think, would you agree that principle can be applied in relationships?
I agree.
Develop yourself as a person.
Absolutely. But Mark, let me say something before I get into chastity and the definition of it. One of the reasons that it's important for me to is, let me tell you something that I've discovered. Some people would think, well, it's only the single guys that are struggling with certain things. Well, no, there are married men that cheat on their wives, okay? But then, even when married men don't cheat on their wives, I got to tell you, in some ways it's probably harder to not expect and demand sex when you want it when you're married than it is when you're single. I have no expectation of sex on a daily basis. I have some married Christian friends who still have a lot of lust, and they have a very hard time with the fact that their wife doesn't want to have sex 3 times a day every day, and their wife doesn't want to have sex just after an argument. And sometimes they turn to things like pornography and masturbation to satisfy themselves. And then that starts messing them up spiritually. It starts messing up their marriages. So it is both single and married men that can struggle with moral Christian sexuality.
Well, there's a basic toxicity, or irony at least, in the formula. Someone said to me once, and I'm sure she didn't think of it. Whoever it was actually a coworker decades ago, but it was a rather profound statement. I'm sure she's not the author of it, what I meant to say. She said, men use love to get sex, and women use sex to get love.
Mm-hmm.
We seem to be wired differently.
Mm-hmm.
We seem to live. We view this relationship thing through different lenses, and books have been written on the topic, and many of those books have found their way into the bestseller list.
Mm-hmm. Oh, The Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus series is excellent. There's others. Dr. Laura Schlesinger has the Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands. Because we get different things out of sex, we use language differently, and we experience things differently, and all of that. So it's something that's very important for married men and single men. A lot of men also, if they get into the pornography, their wives catch them. And then there's that huge problem. The wife feels hurt, this, that, and the other. Sometimes the man is like, what a big deal. It's just this. And the wife feels like she was cheated on. Wives tend to take pornography extremely seriously, Mark.
Well, and they are usually not victim of it. I mean, pornography is marketed mainly to men. Now, that seems to be shifting a little bit culturally, but no matter how much it shifts, the vast majority of pornography is marketed to men. Why is that?
Because men are the most interested in it. They're the most visually stimulated. They're the most interested in sex without emotion, in sex without connection. They just are. Okay, men and women are different.
Right. It's physiology and testosterone, where women don't have a lot of that. I mean, they're not wired that way. But so where does this leave the women? I mean, we could sit here all night and make the case what men are struggling with. How does that? Well, one, how does it affect women? But number two, what? And I guess neither of us can say so with any authority. But what would be the appropriate response from females in the cultural context that we live in today?
Well, I don't want to get too preachy, and so I won't. Okay, and I don't want to blame any of the things on females, but for one thing, they should pick up a book like one of the ones that we just mentioned, and understand how men naturally are. Okay. And so that they can understand how to communicate with men better. And how to get it on. Women need to understand how their fashions affect men. Absolutely. And I'm not going to sit here and criticize women for dressing, lustfully or this or that or the other. But the truth of the matter is, fashions have changed so much in this culture, Mark, that a woman can be dressed more modestly than 90% of the women out there. And she's still showing a lot of cleavage, and she's still showing a lot of leg, and that's what men that she meets are staring at, whether she realizes it or not.
Well, it's interesting because the book that one of the books mentioned, Dr. Laura Schlesinger, The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands. Well, first of all, that's marketed to married couples. But the interesting thing to note here is that she gives a very spiritual examination of the relationship. Now, here we have a Southern Baptist, a Catholic, and
Correct.
She is Jewish. This has little to do with doctrine, but this has to do with what is the truth and what is God's revelation of that truth. Whether you're Catholic, whether you're Baptist or Jewish, there are some things we have to deal with because you can disagree with gravity, but it is still in effect.
And women will always be more drawn toward the emotional. Men will always be more drawn to the physical. But there's a spiritual meeting place that happens in marriage. And God created us male and female. And marriage is a blessed institution. and men are civilized by women, and men find God in women. At the same time, men protect women. Women are more loving and emotional. Men are more logical and physical. And we balance each other out in a relationship.
Well, I can prove it in a very real example. If my wife has, I'm going to loosely phrase it, girlfriend. Okay, this is a friend of hers. They used to live across the street. They've become good friends. They're both female. She is married. My wife is married, obviously. But her friend has a beach house down on the coast, and she, from time to time, every month or so, will go down there for the weekend to kind of help her work on the house and also, of course, enjoy the beach. And the thing that, I mean, there's this kind of female bonding that goes on during that time that we as men have a hard time understanding, but I do understand this. When she is gone for the weekend, while she is gone, there is no making of the bed. Okay. Flushing, I mean, all of these man things that I would never make a bed, never, under any circumstances. Now, if I were in the military, my drill instructor told me to, I would, obviously. But there's no logical reason, in my opinion, to make the bed. I don't care if the blinds are open during the day. I prefer to leave them closed. I'll walk around the house, just plain. I'm not wearing jeans. So let's just leave it at that. If I'm going to, put on a pair of pants just to go get a cup of coffee. Or to let the dog out or whatever. So we are wired very differently, but the thing is, when you get in a relationship, you're both co-experiencing the same reality, and we're seeing it through different lenses. So we interpret, sorry about that. So our interpretation of that event is very different and can lead to conflict. If I don't flush the toilet every single time it's used, that's perceived differently. If I don't make the bed, if I don't, wear jeans, if I don't comb my hair, shave, little things. But
Mark, one of my favorite things in the world to do is that just caused a lot of problems with my wife when I was married. Now, this is stupid. This is really stupid, but it's the kind of things men do. I used to like to pee without raising the seat, not because I was intentionally trying to pee in the toilet seat. I was playing the game of attempting to get all of my pee into the toilet without, okay? And I would intend on cleaning it when I was finished, but I would get distracted and I wouldn't.
Well, so the older you get, the less I would recommend that particular game.
And although we will not wash a toilet with a scrub brush, we will pressure wash the fecal matter off of the back of the toilet with our urine stream when we have a healthy urine. Every man I know has done that.
Well, I don't, washing the dishes, things like that. I went out to Texas for a project. I worked on it for 8 months, and at the time I had a camper, a very nice one, 36 feet.
Mark, I really I have to interrupt you for 1 second. I really apologize for this. I thought I was a little better prepared than I am, but it's our first Friday of doing this, and I'm experiencing a little technical glitch. And in the form of this is draining my battery way more than my experience told me it would. And so all I need to do is I just need to put you on hold for a second while I attach the extension cord to the charger and get the charger hooked up.
I'll finish my story and I'll tell you later.
Okay,
but I was out in Texas. Go ahead and get yourself charged up there. Okay. I was out in Texas for a period of 8 months and living by myself in a camper, a very nice camper, by the way. It was nicer than our first house in many ways. And during that time, I prepared my own meals, if you can call it preparing a meal. But my point is that I would take the plate when I'm done, and the fork when I'm done, and the cup that whatever I was drinking was in, and I would run a little water over the plate to get any loose, food. But then I would just set the whole thing in the refrigerator. And during that entire 8 months, I never washed any dishes, and I never had more than 3 dishes. I had basically a fork and a plate and a cup. To this day, the coffee cup that I use, I guess from time to time, my wife will discover that it's just absolutely hadn't been washed, and maybe it'll get washed maybe every 4 or 5 or 6 months, only because my wife grabbed it and decided it was a good idea to wash it. So with that, she let me go. There we go. You don't need to watch Roger move around. To me, it's just not a priority. I don't think it's unsanitary. I mean, if it were truly unsanitary, I would be sick or something like that, or vomiting. So none of that has ever happened. And as far as making the bed, I actually think that is an unsanitary practice. If I wanted to incubate a culture of mold, mildew, and grody things like that, what I would want is a moist, dark environment. Well, when you sleep, all these skin cells and all this stuff, kind of winds up in the mattress and in the pillow and all of that. And so what we then do is cover it to keep any light that would kill any bacteria or fungal growth. So we cover it up with the sheets. And of course, any moisture, which of course during the night, you say, well, I don't sweat. Oh, yes, you do. It's just not liquid, but you're very much perspiring all of the time. It's just normal. So there's moisture there. So we lock that moisture in, and we lock the light out. I mean, I couldn't think of a better incubator for fungus and mildew and things of that sort. So I would logically lobby that cleaning or making the bed is an unsanitary practice. It is counter sanitary. I would say let those sheets air out, let some light get down there to them and kill all that stuff. And of course, wash the sheets now and then. When I was living in that camper, I really never slept on the bed. I might sleep on top of it, but I would never. I don't know. I don't. But I know it's very important for women. It seems to do those kind of things, and I don't know if I should just attribute that to nesting instinct, which seems to be a trait that females have. Let me see. I see Roger has managed to turn his camera off. If you can hear me, Roger, see if we can get the camera turned on, and we'll try to wrap it up here shortly. We've been at it for about half an hour now, so don't know. Actually, he is no longer in the meetings. He somehow managed to drop out. So anyway, we'll have a new topic next week, and Roger will join us every Friday night. Roger is a very keen and insightful person with a way of abstracting ideas into simple analogies. He and I have had many, many, many very, very long conversations, and when we first kind of met, I just asked him point blank. I said, if we're going to be working together on things, how is this Southern Baptist and this Catholic going to get along? And through the years, we've had some very spirited debates on Protestant versus Catholic theology and things like that. But yet we have always maintained a deep respect for one another's faith, not partly, but in large part, because he can articulate why he believes what he believes, and so can I. And I would challenge all of us as Christians to understand our faith, not just at the academic level, although many church goers are largely ignorant of many not spiritual truth, but just biblical facts. Just that they're just not that familiar with the text itself. I guess having grown up in church and experienced that pretty much for a lifetime, I find many people at quite an intellectual deficit in church settings, and that can lead to some real pitfalls spiritually as we walk, because I remember a particular division in our church was over the same-sex marriage. And there were regular churchgoers, professing Christians, who could not really, in fact, they were angry at us for not being more loving, that we should somehow love these people. And they just could not understand that we did love those people. But God loves those people. But God hates sin. And we have people in same-sex marriages, some of them professing to be Christians, celebrating and asking me to accept. For example, if I were an alcoholic, I wouldn't come to church and expect to say, well, I know I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drunk, but that's okay. God loves me, so I can drink all I want to. Why are you trying to get me to quit drinking? Why don't you accept my drinking? Those are the kind of spiritual battles that's the context, that's the cultural context that we find, and church is not exempt from the cultural context. And part of what Roger and I are going to try to do is examine the cultural context, because the funny thing, have you ever heard people say that religion and politics don't mix? Well, first of all, I think they're inexorably joined, but they sincerely believe that religion is over here and politics is over here, and there's this gap between the two that is there and should be there. So I use the word culture as a way to bridge the gap between religion and culture and politics. Because I think they are joined, and we share a common culture, and much of the culture in this country historically has been rooted. It has as its roots Judeo-Christian theology. So I hope you'll find it interesting. We will have a different topic next week. Don't know what that will be, but I look forward to that. Now, by the way, just a quick update. I have been in conversation today with Del Didway. And Del Didway, we're going to have kind of a dry run tomorrow evening. He's got his gear, and we're going to try to get set up. But Del will be joining us each and every Tuesday, and I think you'll find him extremely interesting and extremely uplifting. Looking forward to that. Troy Towns is another weekly appearing guest that we will be having on Monday night. Don't know if we'll be able to pull that off this Monday or not, but I certainly hope to. And we'll bring you up to speed on that. But until then, we'll turn the controls back over to, Barbara. And I'll try to pitch in a little bit later. I don't work tomorrow, so I have no problem staying up late tonight. It's been fun.